Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Children and Family Scrutiny Board. My name is Councillor Dan Cohen, and I will be chairing today's meeting. This meeting is being webcast on the Council's website so that any members of the public who are unable to observe in person can still observe remotely. And we are incredibly lucky today to be very much observed in person because we have guests today from Leeds Trinity University, from the Public Affairs and Media Law course, and from the Leeds Beckett Journalism course. Welcome one and all. Lovely to meet the Leeds Beckett students just before the meeting for a quick question and answer. Thank you for that. Looking forward to meeting the Leeds Trinity course after this meeting. Hopefully you'll manage to stay the course. So welcome one and all. Can I invite board members to introduce themselves, and can I remind you please to mute your microphone once you have introduced yourself. I'll start to my left.
Andrew Graham, co-opted member representing the Church of England Diocese of Leeds.
Councillor Raymond Jones, representing the ward of Horsworth.
Sorry, Councillor David Jenkins, representing the ward of Killingbeck and Seacroft.
Councillor Karen Renshaw, representing Elsie and Robin Hood ward.
Afternoon, it's Councillor Killamanaka for Bermontoffs and Richmond Hill.
Hello, I'm Emma Flint, Councillor in Wheatwood.
Good afternoon, Councillor Eleanor Thompson from Guiseley and Rawdon Ward, substituting for Councillor Hesselwood.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Oliver Edwards, also Guiseley and Rawdon Ward, and it's great to see our visitors here. You've brought the average age down considerably, which is always a great thing, so a very warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. Councillor Jordan Bowden, representing Roundhay Ward.
Hello, everyone. Councillor Lisa Martin, representing Roundhay Ward.
Councillor Helen Hayden, Executive Member for Children and Families, and yes, I echo those sentiments and welcome our visitors, especially as I did my PGCE at Leeds Trinity University, so you're particularly welcome.
Dan Barton, Deputy Director for Learning.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Julie Longworth and I'm Director of Children and Families in Leeds.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Farah Khan, Deputy Director for Social Care.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Phil Evans. I'm the Chief Officer for Resources, Transformation and Partnerships in the Children's and Families Directorate.
Good afternoon, Hannah Lamplew, Strategy and Influence Lead in the Children and Families Directorate in the Council.
Good afternoon, Tracy Gregg, Senior Manager Employment and Skills.
Good afternoon, I'm Gillian Wallace, Head of Employment and Skills.
I'm Councillor Jonathan Pryor. I'm Deputy Lead with the Council and Executive Member for Economy, Transport and Sustainable Development. Delighted to be back at this scrutiny board just for the first item today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Chanel Skull, Third Sector Rep for Young Lives Leeds.
Good afternoon, Tim Goodall, Councillor for Headingley and Hyde Park.
Hello, Ryan Stevenson, Councillor for Harewood.
Good afternoon, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley and Eden Ward.
And I'm Rob Clayton. I'm the Principal Scrutiny Advisor to the board.
Thank you, everybody. So, Rob, if you could take us through items 1 to 5. One to where?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just the formal items of business that we take each time we meet. So item 1, Chair, is an appeal against refusal of inspection of documents, for which there are none. Item 2 is items for exclusion from the press and the public, and similarly there are none under that item. Item 3 is late items of business, Chair, and there are no late items on today's agenda. Item 4 is declarations of interest, and I will pause to enable any members to declare any under Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct. I shall take silence as none. Item 5, Chair, is apologies, and we have apologies from Councillor Hesselwood with Councillor Thompson subbing, and we also have apologies from some of our co-opted members Tony Britton, Nick Tones, Helen Bellamy, Maria Adams and Anna Skitty. Thank you, Chair.
Colleagues, just to let you know, Tony unfortunately took unwell recently. He is now firmly on the road to recovery. I got in contact with him last week, but we do all, I'm sure we all wish him a full and speedy recovery and send him our very best wishes, and look forward to seeing him back, sat just there, keeping us a firm eye on all of us as soon as is possible. Okay, that takes us then to the minutes of our meeting on the 9th of October. These start at page 7 of our bundle, and as usual I will go through in order. And obviously I'm looking down at page numbers, so shout out if you need me to stop at any point, otherwise I might miss it. Page 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. In that case, somebody happy to propose as an accurate summary? Say again? Thank you, Karen, thank you. Someone to second? Ryan, thank you. All in favour? Those are approved. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, this moves us on to item 7, work experience accessibility. Colleagues will recall that as a board we spoke some time ago about the challenge young people find across the city of different schools have different work experience sessions, so to speak. In years 10, 11, 12 and 13, young people find it particularly challenging to find settings, businesses, organisations that will offer or allow work experience to take place. That's a challenge for every young person, all the more so where you are a young person in care, and all the more so where you are a vulnerable learner. And so the question was asked, what could we do as one of the city's largest employers? What could we do to help in that area and that arena? That's where this comes from. Who's going to kick us off? Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. We've had discussions about how valuable work experience is to our own lives and our own experiences as well. So I really welcome this paper. It's crucial, work experience is crucial in preparing our young people for the future, and this paper outlines the current state of work experience accessibility in Leeds and the barriers that students face, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds and people, our young people such, who are care experienced. I really welcome the engagement with the Leeds Youth Council and want to thank the team for involving our young people. And they've given their views on work experience, and it's really interesting that the young people fed back many of the issues that were discussed when this was first put forward as an area for the board to consider. Access being linked to who you know, not what you know, and the need for more targeted support for those who need it. So I want to thank the board for raising this as an issue, something I'm really passionate about. So, and thank the board for all the support on it.
Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Just to add, really, I suppose I just really want to bring the voice of children and young people onto this agenda item right at the beginning, and just to remind colleagues that we have our 12 wishes, our 12 child-friendly wishes in the city. They're wishes that children and young people themselves have said, you know, will make a difference for them if we are able to act on them. And wish number 11, you know, from the young people themselves, is that young people have access to a wide range of work experience, employment and volunteering opportunities. So again, this really is child-friendly Leeds in action in terms of us responding to the wishes and the views of children in the city.
Anything further from Dan?
Thanks. If that's okay, I think it's just important, given the context of, I think it was the last Scrutiny board meeting where we were talking about academic outcomes, and I think it's sometimes to a detriment that we can focus on those and potentially obsess about academic outcomes when it's really the destinations that children end up in as adults that is the arbiter of whether or not we've been successful as a system around children. So I really welcome the opportunity to discuss the opportunities that we try to provide for children in that area in the city. Thank you.
So perhaps we could just get a bit more detail on how this is being taken forward in terms of the council taking this pilot programme forward, what we're looking at in terms of timeliness, what we're looking at in terms of numbers, how we're looking at perhaps working with other organisations in the city. If we're modelling what good practice can look like in terms of work experience, how we can get other large organisations particularly, because they're the ones that have the capacity, how we can get more people in the city being prepared to say, we recognise that as a business in the city, we have a responsibility to ensure that young people can experience what actually working in a place of work feels like, looks like.
Thank you. So I think it's set out in the paper that there is a general challenge around resources. We definitely know that we can't on our own meet the needs of all of the children in years 10 and years 12. And it's usually those 2 years because they're not the exam years. But years 10 and 12, in terms of work experience, we would be talking into the sort of thousands of placements every year. And so what we think that the best thing for us to do is to focus on those children for whom we are the corporate parent, where if it were our own children, we would be saying and fighting hard to try and make sure that within the context that's described in the paper and has been alluded to at the start of the meeting today, how can we broker those that support? And so I think you've mentioned the Leeds anchor institutions and the organisations that are part of Child Friendly Leeds. That's the place where we want to start. And this is very much a proposal in its infancy at this point in terms of saying that we are going to guarantee to find work experience placements for all children who are looked after in years 10 and year 12. So that's where we are at the moment. That's the proposal. Hannah may be able to offer some more around the work that we're planning to do around Child Friendly Leeds.
Thanks, Dan. So in terms of our young people who are care experienced, just adding on that point, we have something called a Care as a Protected Characteristic partnership that's chaired by Councillor Venner and is meeting later this month, which a lot of the councillors here will have seen their deputation, the Young People's Deputation in full council. And there's young people on that partnership group, and we've identified two priorities. One is very much around housing, and then one is very much around employment, skills. I think Fiona Bollum is chairing that working group. And so I think the next stage will be to bring, because this fits in with that agenda, to see practically how we can support from a council perspective, supporting our care experienced young people to have work experience opportunities as part of that wider group work. And I'll be at that meeting, so I'll make sure we discuss that further there. Then from a child-friendly perspective, we work with ambassadors in the private sector, public sector, third sector, and that is part of what we ask of our ambassadors. So I suppose going forward, we really encourage them to link with Tracy and her team. But if we're asking them about work experience, and particularly focusing on care experienced young people, then yeah, I think we just need to ensure that we have the systems in place to enable that to happen. I know that when we do get requests from care leavers, we forward them onto the work experience email and team, and they try and allocate them a place based on a case-by-case sort of basis rather than putting out an offer. So that is working at the moment. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I have personal experience of this because I used to run the work experience programme in the Brit School for Performing Arts, so I fully agree with Dan in terms of it was definitely vocational there, not just about the academics. And we got all year 10 students going out on work experience, and they really did make a massive difference to their lives. So I think it's hugely important. As is mentioned in the paper, we did have the education business partnerships then, so it was much easier in terms of organisation. Can we do more to sell the benefits, I wonder? I know an example of a year 10 student on a 2-week placement who ended up saving a train company millions of pounds because she realised that the reason the trains were coming late was because they were coming out of the depot late. So, you know, really simple things that just a fresh pair of eyes make a difference to. So perhaps we could sell it more to employers. I noticed in the paper that the council says most of the placements at the council are through contacts, family, etc. I wonder whether the council can set a good example by not doing that, by having some kind of system. I think, for example, the Leeds hospitals have quite a good formalised system where they advertise placements. And that means that students who are more likely to go into the NEET category are more likely to get experience with the council. That would set a good example for everyone else. Could different council departments adopt a school in a priority ward, perhaps, and offer work experience to them just to make sure that we've got that connection, and then set a good example to other companies? Can we think about cheap and simple things as well? I know in my role at the University of Leeds, we would get lots of graduates to come in, and rather than doing 1-hour talks, they would all sit around on tables and students would visit them in a room. So you'd get lots of people on at the same time. The students would have 5 minutes with lots of different people. So just a quick chance to really kind of get an idea of different careers. So that's a much cheaper, we talked about resource challenge, so that's a much cheaper way of doing it. So not on the same scale as careers fairs, but using graduates from those schools. And can we do more to encourage work experience working with businesses? There's not much in the paper about universities. Universities obviously do students into schools. They have educational engagement. We have inter-university. So can we do more to interact with universities, to work with them? I'm sure there could be a students into schools programme where the students went in to talk about their careers so far, for example. So just some ideas.
Thank you. There's loads there. I'm going to try and respond to all of it because I think it's all really excellent. There's something here, though, that the first thing you said was about selling the benefits to employers. And I should add that whilst we've focused in around children who are cared for, care experienced in the proposals we're going to take forward, we have also outlined the existence of the SEND Employment Forum, and that's something that is obviously really close to my heart. And I think some of the conversations we've started to have as part of that forum are around trying to move away from a somewhat paternalistic view of why it's the right thing to do to offer work experience to children and young people with additional needs. You know, doing so is a good thing, obviously, and probably is something which leans on companies' corporate social responsibility. But ultimately, if we only see it as that, it remains a patronising thing that ultimately doesn't see value to the employer as those people as workers and fundamentally impacting on the bottom line for those companies. So I think it's really important that we try and flip the narrative around work experience being something which is genuinely valuable to companies and not just a favour to children and young people. I just wanted to capture that because I think it's really important. You also mentioned, although not in these words, the social gradient in work experience, which has become something which has evolved since the removal of the education business partnership. And I think we have a responsibility as a council, yes, but as a city to try to break that down. And I really like the suggestion about the way that the hospitals are working by almost publicising the opportunities rather than waiting for, someone who knows someone to ask the questions. I think that's a really good idea, and I would have thought fairly easy to implement. There were a couple of other things that you mentioned which are probably outside the sphere of work experience and fit into the work-related learning curriculum that schools deliver. So actually creating those kind of taster sort of speed dating sessions, inviting universities in and colleagues from businesses to come in to do kind of taster sessions in school is very much alive and kicking in the city, and schools, secondary schools, have their own curriculum responsibilities to deliver that sort of thing. We could probably audit that and see what the sort of where the gaps are potentially across the city in terms of provision, and target any response from the council to supporting schools which perhaps weren't offering that. But it's the difference between work experience and careers, education, information, advice and guidance, and work-related learning, which schools already do quite a lot of. But I like the adopt a school thing. We'd have to find 250 councillors, or councillors would have to have multiple schools, but I think it's a really nice idea. Thank you.
On that adopt school idea, I was thinking more of kind of council departments rather than councillors. But thank you. But thank you for the response. That's really useful.
Thank you. Emma.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the report, and it's pulled so much together, I think, and it's good to see just what we offer. I just wanted to talk about like the reality really of what happens. So from my experience of like having kids gone through high school and working in a lot of different schools, so most schools seem to offer work experience now in year 12. Makes sense, it's something to put on your application for uni or wherever you're moving on to next. But what happens is you get warning that this is going to happen. So my daughter in year 12 has got her email last week, and you're expected to just then find something by March with no other kind of like prompt or help or guidance really. So if your parents are well networked, if they talk to you about it, like if you have the internet at home, if you have a laptop that you can send an email from, you're all right. But my concern is that it just it kind of deepens the inequalities that we know are already there, and it's really, really, really important. The year 12 work experience, like how do you stand out in any way when you're applying? How do you get an idea of whether you want to go through the hard work of applying for medicine or like whatever it is that you want to do? So I just feel like we're failing a lot of kids by just relying on parent and carer networks, and that's just really, really unfair. I think, and that is the reality. Even if there's the stuff out there, we're not joining it up to the kids that need it, and we're missing out on a lot of potential from kids. So, and I don't want to pile on a lot of extra work to schools because this is difficult. I know, but like in a school, you've got a ready-made community there of the parents, carers, wider community, probably a lot of people that would offer placements, and it seems like not an impossible piece of work to me that you could have like a bank of businesses, of parents who work all across the city and beyond, who might be willing to just offer every year a placement there instead of it just being to their own kids or their kids' best friends. So is there a way we could like pull all that together, like in each community, and like because then the reality is like kids go off on their like week's work experience, and there's a group of kids every year who are left doing their work experience in school because there's nothing else, and like that's just sad, isn't it, and not fair. So I just wonder if we could like really pull together in each school community this bank of placements. Thanks.
I think that's a really good. I mean, it's very similar to the idea of having that sort of web, almost to make it feel real, to have a set of opportunities that are within a locality published on a website without fear or favour. They're not kind of put aside or set aside for, like you said, relatives or friends. I think that's a really great idea. I think there's something here, the honesty about this conversation in terms of resourcing, because ultimately we've talked about a resource which is no longer there, which used to do this work. And so we've talked about targeting what resource we do have at the children who are both the most vulnerable, and also our responsibility as corporate parents. I think there probably is, though, that risk in the middle, a very wide swathe of children who, as you say, end up doing work experience by being a teaching assistant in their own school, for example. And that's not without value, but it is unfair. I don't see why we couldn't try and provide some support around kind of orchestrating that system. There is, again, from a resourcing perspective, a knock-on impact, as ever, around risk assessments and all of the things that the EBP used to do, that we have to be careful about sort of drawing the line, what it is that we're doing in terms of creating the, kind of orchestrating that, but we won't have the capacity to do all of that other testing work that needs to happen. So I don't think it's impossible, but I think we have to just do so within an understanding of the limits of what our resources will allow us to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for me this really takes us back to the Children and Young People's Plan that we've got in the city, and our vision. It's not just a children's services plan; it's a plan for all organisations in the city who seek to support children and families. And central to that is equality, diversity, inclusion. Central to that is recognising that often it is the most vulnerable children in the city who do miss out on opportunity, and that we've got to tackle that and that we've got to address that. Equally central to child-friendly Leeds, is about skills for life. So it's about supporting children through their early years all the way into adulthood, so that they can take advantage, of everything that the city's got to offer, but also so that they can contribute and become active citizens and feel that they belong in Leeds and that they can invest into the future of Leeds. It's a huge area. I think we are all acknowledging and recognising that we've got more to do, and that we want to do more. I think we can absolutely take, this conversation, the point that you've just made, and again, sit it within our ambition with the child-friendly Leeds and our Children and Young People's Plan, and have that conversation with our education colleagues and others in the city. But in a way, I suppose we really felt, the responsibility of our corporate responsibility for children who are looked after, and for care leavers. We are their corporate parents. And as Dan has said, we because of the need to target our resources, that's where we wanted to focus, but recognising that any best practice that we develop for those children, we can learn from and we can extend to all children. As Hannah's already said, we're having conversations with our child-friendly Leeds ambassadors. So we've got 300 ambassadors from private organisations in the city. We've got 150 ambassadors from our community and voluntary sector within the city. So we need to maximise those. But I think the point that was made earlier in the meeting, I think, is a really, really crucial point about actually the talent, that these young people, these children, can bring to all of our organisations, our daily experiences. And it just makes me think about the deputation that we had at Full Council from those young people who had been in care, when we talked about, the city getting behind having a care experience as a protected characteristic. And the young man who spoke really eloquently, about the fact that often children who are in care, children who've left care, that they, they're seen through the lens of a stigma, they're seen through a negative lens, and actually what he was talking about was, the superpower sometimes, in terms of resilience, in terms of creativity, thinking about our children in the city with neurodiversity, and how they see things differently and how they can, identify things differently and come to different solutions that perhaps others of us wouldn't. So for me, it's back to ambition, it's back to diversity. But it's recognising, as Dan has said, that we are in a time of challenge in terms of resources, and we've got to start somewhere. So yes, absolutely, we'll have the bigger conversation we are, but let's focus to begin with on those children that we do have corporate responsibility for.
Thank you. Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. I think it... Sorry, it was me you called. Yeah, okay, yeah, just checking. I thought I heard someone over there talking, and that's fine. All right. Thank you very much for everything that you've shared so far. It was a very interesting report. A few things I'd like to pick out. So I think the feedback on page 27.48 from the Youth Council was very important. So talking about having time off to attend careers fairs and other events, and having that recognised as being of educational value for the young people is important. And I think the other feedback from the Youth Council was very helpful. I think also thinking about the 2-week placements, and I recognise that this may be a wider issue with the system we have in this country, but I wonder if the idea of having a 2-week placement is sufficiently flexible, given that we are in an age of remote working. Now that is becoming the reality in a lot of organisations, and including for many of us, the idea of people going into an office for 2 weeks and being there when quite a few of the people working in that office may well be working remotely themselves. Is that model sufficiently flexible to adapt to the modern working realities of many organisations? And I know as well, for me as a councillor, and I'm sure many of us have had requests at different times from people to shadow for work experience, and it's actually quite challenging because quite a lot of our work will be in different places in the community, but also we'll do quite a lot of work from home as well. We're not sitting stationary in an office, and we want to support people, and we want to give those opportunities, but actually identifying a block of time, a 2-week block of time, can be quite challenging. And I know it's the same for council officers who are massively overstretched as it is. And so I wonder if that's something that we need to think about. And also when it comes to the voluntary sector as well, there are many voluntary organisations. I can think of some of the fantastic organisations in my community, working with older adults, working with many different groups who are actively looking for more volunteers, but their work doesn't necessarily fit within 2 weeks. However, they would really welcome the opportunity to have something longer term, or over an extended period of time, and that could be incredibly valuable for those organisations. And if we are able to get more young people volunteering, is there a way that can be recognised as work experience, and particularly for those who don't fit within the priorities which have been identified, which I would agree with. I think there does have to be a degree of prioritisation, but for those other young people, they also need to have opportunities. So can we maybe think outside of this this 2-week box a little bit? And finally, and I'm not sure this is entirely within the remit, but I'll raise it anyway. I think looking at the feedback on page 22.16 from the SENS Employment Forum, I think the figure about the unemployment rate for people with learning disabilities and autism, it should be very sobering for all of us, and that's a priority. So making it easier for more people to get into employment, but also when they're within employment, and again thinking of feedback that I've received from people who are affected by this within the City Council. To start with, are there sufficient opportunities for people to have what I would call contrasted working experiences? So for example, if someone is working within highways, having the opportunity to work in a different council department, where they might be able to learn different skills, where they might be able to get different experiences. Are there sufficient opportunities once people have been employed for them to add to their skill set, for them to get different work experiences? And that's something that, as I say, may well be outside of the scope of this particular discussion, but I think it would be good to reflect on, because there are many times where people can see things differently, where they can bring in different areas of knowledge, and I feel that sometimes if people go into one role and they stay in that role, they're not maybe getting as much out of it as they could, but equally the council as an employer is maybe missing out on other talents and skills that they might have. So thinking a bit about flexibility and how much scope there is for flexibility, I think would be helpful there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's some really great ideas there that I'm going to take away, certainly. I think if we go back to the original question around the flexibility around that kind of 2-week block, I think there's lots of scope to be more flexible for all of the reasons that you've said. I can't help as an educationalist and previous leader in the school. There is something about timetabling and pupil, man management, if you like. There's just kind of some risks in there that are setting my hairs raising in terms of if we didn't have those children in a place that we could see that they were, and we were sort of saying, oh, you're working from home today, because that's what we do anyway, that I can see that being slightly challenging. But I think there's ways around that, and I think one of the things that as a council particularly, which might be useful, you mentioned that you'd love to help, or councils would like to help, but we do a lot of working from home, so you can't really go and do that together. But there are lots of different bits of the council as well, where the work that is done is perhaps of a type that is confidential or of a level which you wouldn't want a young person involved in for obvious reasons. But I'm just thinking we could create a kind of carousel in the way that FE colleges do for sort of 14 to 16-year-olds, where you get a taster of lots of different curriculum areas. I think it's not beyond the wit of the council to create a sort of menu of experiences that would see children coming in, and perhaps however many we could accommodate, but on a kind of a deliberate carousel where they would be participating in work that had been checked and was known to be valuable, very plural in terms of the different sort of sectors and areas of work, but which were definitely not going to pose a problem from either a safeguarding or a sort of confidentiality perspective. So that's one I'm going to take away, because I mean, to your later point around sort of, although it's not within the scope, it does talk to our responsibilities as an employer to provide continuous professional development. And I think we could definitely look at, I guess where I've seen it before is work shadowing opportunities, where senior colleagues kind of create space in their diaries, of which there's loads obviously, to accommodate that kind of work. We have to be conscious of the financial challenge that we've got, and if we're not doing a piece of work over here because we're talking to someone and helping them to understand what the work is like over there, that's a challenge. But again, not impossible if we consider the whole of the council. The final thing I'll say, there's loads more, actually 2 more points, sorry to monopolise the responses. One of them is around volunteering. I think that's a fantastic idea. Yes, volunteering can and should be considered as part of the broader work experience portfolio. So we can definitely do that, and that's about signposting and engaging the third sector. And in terms of autism, last point, whilst it is a sobering figure, we have got some green shoots of some really brilliant work and practice through some of the pilots we've done with Lighthouse Futures, where we've secured, some really high rates of conversion from supported internship into paid work, which tells me that we should be hopeful about what we can achieve by sort of multiplying what we know is a successful mechanism.
Thank you. Just so colleagues know who is yet to be brought in on this, and I am rather conscious of time, although I'd allocated quite a lot to this. I've got Ryan, Roy, Rick, Shanaz and Eleanor. That's who I've got, and that will be that, I'm afraid, on this item. It's already going to go on. So could I urge colleagues, particularly at the top of the table, to brevity is always welcome, while not wanting to miss the key essence. Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. It strikes me what we're making the case for here is a sort of national service, but I'll perhaps leave that one for later. A couple of points. It's interesting when we talk about the council's role in sort of in doing this, because when I had a quick look on the council's website, in the search function I put work experience and there's nothing. So in terms of how people do currently get work experience in the council, one assumes you must know somebody in the council or have some sort of nous about you to send an email to somebody you know. So as we work through that pilot, that's obviously a good place to start for us. I think it's really important as well that we try and define what work experience is. There is nothing in statute at present that does so. And then that sometimes conflicts with where work experience becomes an unpaid internship, and then the moral questions around that, around whether that's right or not, and whether the council should be promoting that. So I think when we mention work experience, most of us think 2 weeks at school, but I think there's previous suggestions that it be no longer than a month, I think, but it's important, I think, that we define it ourselves. One thing that I think would probably help schools is having a centralised risk assessment template ready. So rather than maybe asking schools to do more things like organise a bank of opportunities for their students, although for many that will already exist based on what previous students did, the actual legwork of having to go back out to companies and voluntary sector and get them to fill out what is often extensive risk assessments, including insurance liabilities, who's going to be their name, contact, health. It's quite laborious, and actually as an organising role, the council can probably assist more with that. And then finally, harking back to my point about unpaid internships, I think they are morally reprehensible, and therefore perhaps we could utilise the council supply chain better. I think previously do we require all council supply chains to pay a living wage, I think, or leave living wage? Something similar where we make sure that we're not therefore trading with companies that utilise unpaid internships, but more importantly, that maybe if they're going to have a contract with the council, they will agree to do work experience placements by return as well. Thanks, Chair.
Can I just come in on that one? Yes, as part of the council's procuring a number of services, goods or services, we have a number of social value measures, including people into jobs, apprenticeships, work experience and school engagement activities. And we work a lot with some great developers, great contractors in the city who are very keen to offer opportunities. And we sort of maybe call them experiences of the workplace as opposed to that standard 2-week block opportunity. So we do get a lot of good social value from some of our contractors and developers in the city. And I can provide some more information on that.
It's interesting, isn't it? I take that point, and yet coming through the council, looking at our data, we're looking at about 38 placements a year. So it's how we really drive that up, drive that through, and really make those available. Ray.
A couple of things. Would it not be advantageous to actually inform schools that it is possible that we may be able to get some of these young people? Because I don't see that at this point in time. The other thing that, because I used to deal with this as a trade union official actually, was I was working in schools about understanding the risk for young people. So we need to make sure that if schools are sending children to here, basically, that they understand there's a risk and there's a responsibility from us, but also a responsibility from the school to make sure that the pupils are prepared for that. Care leavers, I've got to say that is an almighty challenge, because we have the issue of many of them will have, how can I put it, low expectations, which is probably wrong. It's how we can encourage that and get that better. And I think that is an almighty challenge, and I don't envy, but I think that's something we need to have a real serious think about, how we can get people's confidence so they're able to go into a workplace. Obviously there's certain jobs on the council that you would not want young people involved with, to be absolutely fair. But I think it would be useful to write to the schools and say, this is possible. I was absolutely appalled at what Ryan just said, at 43. I found that an incredibly low number, and it should be far higher than that as a sensible employer. That's the basics. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, is anybody coming back on that? Yeah, thanks.
I can pick that up, Councillor Jones. Yeah, we do work with all of our secondary schools, FA and sixth form colleges in the city around providing and supporting their careers guidance. We have a newsletter and a network, so we do engage with schools around what opportunities there are in the city. And the risk assessments, actually, they have to have a specific risk assessment. We used to, as Dan said, we used to do those risk assessments. I think there's a cost of something like £45 per risk assessment. We don't do those. Another local authority does those on our behalf, but each placement does have to have a formal risk assessment.
Hi, yeah, just to come in on the statistics. One of my teams, the Voice, Influence and Change team, we work with lots of young people, so you wouldn't be surprised that we get lots of requests to do work experience. And I really like what Tracy said about calling it experiences of the workplace, because we had so many requests we weren't able to offer lots of 2-week work experience placements. So we offered all those that got in touch instead a work experience day, which was really clearly planned, and they got lots from it. What we did with that is we then, because it's actually HR, human resources, that lead on, manage the work experience email. That's not a team, that's a little part of one person's role. So I've sort of had various conversations with them, but what I did is we filled in all the relevant paperwork and logged as work experience. But I do think there is more work experience placements in the council. I just don't think they're actually, everyone knows about them. So I think there probably is other teams and departments that do them. So that might be an action to try and raise awareness about ensuring if teams and services are offering work experience placements that they're completing all the, I'm sure they're doing all the checks and all the paperwork, but just informing the HR team to get an accurate representation. Thank you.
Who'd have thought a big organisation making things more complicated than they need to? Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I remember when I was at school a long, long time ago, the work experience the way it worked then was that the school actually gave a list of employers, and you then went back and said, this is the one I'd like to do, and it was almost like a choice preference. But what they also did was you had 2 weeks, but it was over a month. So you might have the first 2 weeks in the month, and then one of your colleagues might then have the second 2 weeks. So the employers actually had work experience children for a whole month, which means that those that are within the system actually get twice as many, as it were, which may help ease things if you haven't got that many people. But I remember going to careers advice and them giving us a list of people. If you didn't like anybody on the list and you could find somebody, you could suggest one, and then they'd be risk assessed, and then you could go to the one of your choice, such as if you've got contacts. But if you didn't have contacts, the school actually managed to come up with enough for everybody.
I think that I remember about that time as well, and it was very similar then. I think there is just, I don't want to sort of appear negative because I think it's a really good idea. I'm trying to put myself in the position of a head teacher with all of the pressures around curriculum content and delivery, and you know, work experience time is a particularly, it can be disruptive from the point of view of the organisation and delivery of the curriculum. And so if we were to spread that disruption out over another 2 weeks, it could create a difficulty for the school in terms of curriculum management. Not impossible, but I do think it's important to flag that. We can still take that away.
Yeah. Also, you'd have half your year 10 for 2 weeks, and then half. I mean, how do you plan and deliver lessons and the curriculum, and you lose in a whole month when actually, if we look at the report, a lot of schools don't do work experience at year 10 because of the curriculum, loss of curriculum, and our schools are under such enormous pressure. I think I thought when I was still on SLT, my former school, and still teaching, I fought to keep work experience because it's in. It is incredibly valuable, but it has come back. I'm really pleased to hear. But I'm just picking up on Councillor Stevenson's remark about bringing in about national service. Maybe we should bring back the Education Business Partnership, which were axed in 2011, because they did all that risk assessments, they did all that organisation. Those lists that came to schools that I looked down and tried to decide what to do back in the 80s was provided by that by the local authorities who were funded an arm's length organisation to do. We don't have that anymore, and we have head teachers and teachers under enormous pressure, and they do deliver really outstanding work-related education in our city, getting young people out into, especially at year 10. Because I appreciate year 12, but I think it's crucial at year 10 where they are deciding what they're going to do post-16. when many young people have to leave school because they're in an 11 to 16 school. So that work experience in year 10 is crucial for them to deciding, you know, how long they're going to stay in education, whether they want to go into the world of work. Work experience is invaluable in putting off people as much as a certain job as it is encouraging them to do a job. So I don't want to be negative. I'm very passionate about it. But we do have a resource in you know, on the team. And if you go to the Send Apprenticeship Fair, which I went to, it's amazing and it's brilliant. And you know, and we have some fantastic employers who know the worth. I think we've got to sell it to schools more than employers, to be quite honest. And we've got to make it easy for employers and easy for schools. But we haven't got the resources to do that.
Hannah, very briefly.
Very briefly, just to comment about lists for young people. One of the things we heard at the SEND Partnership Board from young people who took that over back in, I think, 2017 is they have very limited, those young people in special inclusion, so special schools or SILCs, work experience opportunities. So we developed a project in partnership with Kirkgate Market and various different SILCs. And we've been doing that since 2018, called Compass House. So like we're talking about other approaches, every year they do a work experience enterprise project where all the different students develop and make things to sell. Then they're given a unit, which I'd encourage you to come, bring your pennies and spend, between the 9th to the 13th of December. And different children come down each day and get the experience of what it's like in sort of retail, customer service, working with the public. They get to meet other stall sellers, and some of them haven't had other experiences, and it has really inspired different parts of their career. So there are innovative approaches if we think collaboratively. So thank you.
Thank you for that. John, I'm going to bring Councillor Prior Jonathan in.
I just thought I'd come in because I think we're coming towards the end of the debate. I just wanted to reflect very briefly on my own personal experience of this. My school was almost exactly as Councillor Downs was describing, maybe slightly more recent, but not too much. I think my work experience was almost exactly 20 years ago, and we applied for a pool of work placements. I applied to work in my local MP's office. My family had no history in politics. I wasn't from a particularly wealthy background, and actually that 2-week experience, I can quite honestly say, changed the trajectory of my life, and I don't think I'd be here without it. And I think there's that real sense that we need to keep in mind that Dan said at the start, that it's not about work, it's about the destinations after. And I do think we have to reflect that 20 years ago and earlier, both school financing and local government financing, we were in a completely different place to what it is now. So we have to decide what we prioritise. And I think we are making the right priorities. I think looked after children in care, is the right approach. We have a responsibility for all children in Leeds, but we have an additional responsibility for those children in care. Councillor Jones was absolutely right that it's a challenging cohort, but I think it's right that we put those first. So I'd be really keen to look at what we are doing right across the council. I think, like a lot of things in Leeds Council and in the city, we're doing a huge amount of good work, but it's not always pulled into one strand. The point Councillor Stevenson made about when you search work experience on the website, it doesn't come up with anything. I think that's a really direct thing we can take away from here to look at. One thing I'll do is go away and look at not just our supply chains, but the anchor institutions. 1 in 6 jobs in Leeds works for one of these anchor organisations. So if they can do more to provide that work experience, that's a really positive thing, and hopefully pull it all together. I hope that we can do that for children looked after first, but hopefully if we get some of those systems in place, as I'm optimistic that financing of schools and local authorities will improve over the next few years. Hopefully if we build those systems, we just have to build those systems up to include more children over time. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on the point that Councillor Jones raised earlier around young people that have left care, and actually issues of self-esteem, issues of confidence, and I think for me that is really critical, and I suppose as a mum of adult children and a nanny of 2 grandchildren, just building those trusting relationships. And that's why it was really fantastic to see, as a consequence of the Josh McAllister review, so the National Review of Children's Social Care, that a key objective now, and isn't it sad, really, in a way that this has to be made explicit through a national social care review, but a key objective being that a child who leaves care leaves so with at least a small number of trusted relationships with adults in their life. And I just wanted to highlight that because we are absolutely committed to that in Leeds. You know, that we know, you know, there's individuals, there's professionals within the council, whether it's a school teacher, you know, who know that child, who've got that trusted relationship with that child, who understand the child's needs, that the child can be honest and open with them, and ultimately who will advocate and champion for that child, who will engender ambition and dreams and aspiration. And that's what we're about in Leeds. We've got a long way to go. You know, this was the first report to the Scrutiny Board, but we're absolutely committed, and that's the ambition that we've got for children in the city.
Thank you. Shanaz.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be as quick as possible. I just wanted to echo as well what Councillor Flint said about the disadvantaged communities and the lack of support from parenting because of lack of awareness. And what about those children where the parents don't have English as a first language? I think that's really, really important to recognise that. And as a city, there's so much talent and I think people that want to give back. For example, the government have a Help to Grow programme, which I don't know, is for businesses, where mentors support businesses. I think the same kind of approach for mentoring and coaching for children would be really, really beneficial. And I think in the report it also mentioned about having a portal where where work experiences would be available and should be advertised on. I think that would be really, really beneficial. Coming from VCSC, third sector, we've had young people come and volunteer with us for years, and they often, once the placement finishes, they stay with us, they come back, they volunteer, and it's amazing for their experience. Myself, I did my work experience in Childline as a young person, and obviously that's had a huge impact on my life, which is why I'm pursuing a career in what I have. So it's so important that we do support and provide those opportunities, and as Leeds City Council members, officers work with so many different businesses, communities. You come in contact with so many businesses at different levels, and I think to make it a priority to speak to those individuals and ask them, do you want to become a business ambassador, you know, to join, and for example, the licensing team, when businesses are applying for a license, maybe it could be a question there where you could ask, would you want to be part of the business anchor model, and bring on, you know, young children, but also some training will need to be, I think, established for businesses, for third sector, so that they can provide more support in that capacity as well, and a bit of forward thinking in terms of fields where we've got lack of workforce. Like, for example, we've just been on the housing meeting. They're talking about how there's not many people that we can commission. There's a lack of workforce in that field. How do we encourage young people to get more involved and apply for, you know, go pursue a career in that field as well? Thank you.
I think it's a really, I think I mentioned in a previous meeting that the kind of match-up between large numbers of children who might be neat and workforce challenges around some of those key areas. So that's an obvious one for me. You mentioned areas of the city which might be sort of less well provided for in this area. And just as a final and quite a nice anecdote from me, as part of my induction, I went to meet an organisation called Inter University, which has a footprint in the city, does some work in Beeston and Hare Hills and various other places. And I was delighted that one of the people that was showing me around there was a student I'd taught French in London in year 9. And so it's kind of nice to see that coming full circle in Leeds. But the great point there is that, you know, in terms of our resourcing challenge, if there are third sector organisations, which there are, which we can engage with strategically as part of our plan, it doesn't have to be the council that funds everything. It's about signposting and partnering and brokering. So I think there's real opportunities.
Thank you for that. Last contribution from Eleanor.
Thank you. It's been really helpful. I certainly know that 2 days at Ferry Bridge put me off working in a power station for life. But I have had a really positive experience of hosting 2 students over the last 2 years, and in fact this year was during the general election week, which was not quite the experience she expected when she applied, but and my student from last year is now studying politics at university, which is great. Just really want to hone in on the SEND aspect of this. But being aware that there's a really positive example with Careers for All at Leeds Museums and Galleries, and wondering how other parts of the council can learn from that, mirror it in their own ways and grow that model with the paid work placements spread over a period that works for the students and for the organisation, and how we can learn from best practice within our own organisation. Lots of other questions, but that'll do for now. Thank you.
I'll be really quick. I think all of these really good ideas, particularly in relation to SEND, we should take to the SEND Employment Forum. That whole piece around sharing best practice is just something which we should absolutely take there. So I can see that Tracy's writing that down, which is great.
Thank you everybody for all of that. It's interesting. At point 48, it was raised. One of the asks was around council doing more to raise awareness of placement opportunities and council services. I think there is something, and I say the council, but not just the council, the anchor institutions, businesses. Many years ago, when I did work experience, it was all quills in those days, but there was an expectation around businesses, organisations of whatever size, that in summer, you were going to have a work experience, and over the years, as things have become more formalised, I think some of that's probably the fear of risk assessments and all the reporting bits that quite rightly go around with it. There's a reluctance to facilitate that. But I think anything we can do as a council without, and it's not resource heavy, I think, but anything we can do as a council to create places within our own organisation, and that, I think that goes to us as councillors as well, the idea of carouselling. So I've worked with colleagues where I can say, well, I can have that person for 2 days, can you do that 2 days? And building a week or so's worth of a placement between a number of people is really valuable, and working, and dare I say it, even trying to work in a cross-party way to really give a broad experience is all the better. But I think there is a huge amount we can do as a council to model what this looks like and encourage others to do the same. We will, I'm sure, have this come back to us with how we're progressing and how we're developing some of these ideas. I think it is such an important part of the experience of young people to give them that exposure to working life. We have a recommendation at page 19 where we're asked to note the contents of the report, identify linked areas of interest which will form the basis of future work in this area, and obviously we know it's going to come back to us. Is somebody happy to move that? Thank you. Second. Thank you very much. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Colleagues, thank you very much indeed. Quick pause while we change the table. All those that are attending. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We are at agenda item 8. It's at page 31 in the pack. Little Owl's Nursery Review. Who's going to kick us off? Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper updates on the progress of the Little Owls Nurseries Review. It contains the Executive Board paper approved last month, which sets out the findings of the market sounding exercise and the feedback from engagement with parents and carers around 12 settings. Work will now begin on the formal process of determining whether provision can move to alternative providers, including 4 settings to nearby schools. The Council will continue to engage with parents and carers, and in line with the feedback we have received on what is important to them, we will seek assurances that all future nursery provision will be of high quality with an appropriate level of fees and will continue to be child-centred and ensure the most vulnerable children in the city are well catered for. This will be considered on a setting-by-setting basis, and importantly, should these needs not be met, the default position will be for the Council to continue as the provider. Leeds will retain at least 9 council-run nurseries, all rated good or outstanding, more than any other comparator city, with improved staffing resilience. In providing its own direct nursery service, Leeds remains an outlier amongst councils in England, and this investment at a time of significant financial stress for the council and local government in general is a sign of the council's commitment to early intervention and in delivering the best start it can to children across the city. I'll leave it there, Chair. I don't know whether anybody else wants to come in.
Colleagues, no? Okay. Members? Board members, no? This could be the quickest item we ever deal with. Okay, so just one question. So, oh, go on. Oh, bless your heart. So just one question from me. So is there an expectation that when the setting changes from a council-run setting to run by another, that parents will pay an increased fee from what they are paying at the moment? Is that a likely expectation?
I don't know that it's an expectation, because I suppose we don't know at this moment in time whether the fees will be higher than that parent is currently paying at the moment. So I don't think we're in a position to be able to respond, Councillor Cohen, until we have identified whether there are going to be other providers for our little owls nurseries.
Because as I understand it at the moment, Little Owls is significantly lower than most other providers. That's my understanding. So then, if not an expectation, a realistic belief, we must have an idea. Or do we not have an idea? If we don't have an idea, then I'm quite happy that that's your answer.
I think it's too early to be absolutely prescriptive on that. What we do know through the expressions of interest that we received to date is that the fees which providers charge across the city range from around 40 to £66 per session, if you like. So I think there's quite a variance, and until we identify who any new provider will be, we don't know. There is a variance.
Thank you. Oliver.
Thank you very much, Chair. A few questions. So on page 37, the feedback from parents where there's been a withdrawal of service at settings. So I note how many of the parents received their first choice and the remaining 4 received their second choice. A quick question, has there been much feedback from parents who've been through that process? It would be helpful to know a little bit more about that from the parents' perspective as well, because understandably many parents are very worried about this and about potential changes. So it would be helpful to know a bit more about the parents who have gone through that process. I think reading some of the parental feedback and some of the comments, it's really heartening to see how much parents value the work that staff in Little Owls nurseries are doing, and how much they value the attention that their children are getting. And there's a lot that we can be proud of in terms of the work that's happening. I think one of the things that is clear from this is that if there are to be any changes, those things that the parents value, so particularly around the staff, particularly around the training, particularly around the supervision, really need to be baked into any any new arrangements. And I think that also links in to some extent with some of the trade union engagement. I think the trade unions, I know, are a part of this, and I think they must be an absolutely essential part of that. So it'd be quite helpful to hear a little bit more about the trade union engagement as well. And I think there was also, I mean, reading the parental feedback, so this was on page 49, some people talked about the use of nursery buildings when not being used, and whether there's more scope there. So in terms of the sustainability, in terms of making maximum use of those resources, I thought that parental feedback was quite interesting. So yeah, it'd be helpful to have a little bit more there, please.
I'm going to speak very quickly because I think Vicky will probably be the best person to come in on the parental feedback, but I asked the same question a few weeks ago and blown away by the lovely feedback. The moving of, and it will be different again with these 12 settings, but you know, the parental feedback from, and the vast majority did go into another Little Hours settings with their key worker and the staff. The staff were by and large accommodating in their first preference, as has been stated. But it's really, really lovely feedback, and I'm really proud of the team. I'm really thankful to them for all the hard work that went into working really closely with each individual family and what was best for them, and that is really quite labour intensive and quite resource heavy, but you know, it worth doing really, really well. Going on to your concerns about the same kind of things that parents value in another setting, I'm very confident that the 4 that hopefully, if it happens, will go into the school settings. All those same things that happen for the school staff in terms of training and support and career development, and all the nursery will become part of that school, if you will. So, and I think it'd be advantageous for the school and for the nursery to be part of the school environment. And we have some excellent providers out there that are not ourselves. We are the best, obviously, but we have some excellent providers out there who are really keen to work in collaboration with us and hold a lot of our all of our values. When I go around and visit, I went to one in my because we don't have any Little Hours in my ward, and I went to the preschool council. So if you've ever sat in front of a council of 3- and 4-year-olds, it's well, quite similar to what it'll be like on Wednesday, to be honest, except yeah, one going back to the careers, when I asked them what they would like to do when they grew up, one of them, there was lots of police officers and fire officers, firefighters, and then one little lad wanted to be the bad guy, and I suppose we do need somebody. Yeah, exactly. Vicky, do you want to come in on?
Thank you. I think Councillor Hayden's just said a lot of what I was going to say, really, in terms of the transition from the nurseries that have closed to a different one. That's gone really well, and obviously both staff and parents have been working really well together and closely to make sure that that transition was smooth. As Councillor Hayden said, a lot of the staff went with those children, so those relationships that they've already built up have been able to continue. In terms of moving forward, we're absolutely keen, you know, it has been heartwarming to read the lovely comments and positive comments from the families that use our Little Owls. And in terms of those issues that you've just raised around staff training, and then that will be very much part of the next phase of this exercise. We will be, you know, really scrutinising potential future providers around how they look after their staff as well as how they look after their children. And there will be some continuation, because we would absolutely expect that another provider taking on our Little Owls will also, our own existing staff will continue to work in that nursery, and therefore we hope that those relationships will continue for those children that are already based there. I think your final point... Trade unions, yes, absolutely. So we work really, really closely with our trade unions and have from the beginning of this. It's absolutely essential. They're really helpful in terms of us problem solving and making sure that we are doing the very, very best for our staff. So they've been kept informed, and we meet on a very, very regular basis with them and lead officers, as well as the workforce directly as well, to make sure that everyone has a shared understanding of the processes and what's happening.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back really just on the point, I suppose, about quality and quality of provision. You know, and again, I've taken us back to the Children and Young People's Plan, you know, and central to that is every child needs getting a best start, you know, and the importance of early years in that and the early years foundation stage curriculum. We do have an early years improvement model, again, which is really driven by some of our consultant teachers within the directorate. We've also got an early years network in Leeds, so which meets regularly, so from the private, from the voluntary, from the independent sector, from local authority. We've got an early years gateway, which has on Leeds for Learning, and I think they have had 3,000 views, hits since May. So again, providers from right across the city, whether that's accessing resources that can support them with their curriculum, whether it's accessing online meetings for Senkos. So I suppose, again, just that ambition and that commitment and, I suppose, drive to increase the quality of all of the provision across Leeds.
Thank you. Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. The great thing about 2 and 3-year-olds is they give you a very straight answer to a straight question. So we'll look forward to Wednesday, Councillor Hayden, to see how much you learned at your visit. At the last Scrutiny Board meeting and at Exec Board, myself and then Councillor Lamb asked a very specific question. Where in this city can you access childcare for £40 an hour? And on both occasions we were told, we don't have the information, we shall come back to you. So where in the city can I get £40 an hour childcare? £40 a day.
Councillor Stevenson, I'm sorry, I don't have that information in front of me, but I commit to sending that to you directly after this meeting, because we have had the expressions of interest. In the expressions of interest that we have received, that was a question, so we do have the information, and I commit to sharing that with you.
Yeah, I'm just going to come back on that. We've had a similar answer to that at the last time this was raised. To my knowledge, I think it's been accepted, that information hasn't been provided yet. That's really not on. I'm not going to comment on Executive Board, but actually if an undertaking's been given to provide information, which it had previously been, and it still hasn't been provided, that's somewhat concerning. Sorry, you can come back here.
Just, I'll take Julie at her word and we'll have that. I know it will come. But just to be clear, it's not what was in the expression of interest, because before the expression of interest we were told there were places in this city. So the question we're really looking for, where existing in this city, existing settings, can somebody get £40 a day? And so that's what we're looking for. And then if it's supplemented in the expression of interest, so be it. Although I suspect you'll be somewhat tied in what you can say in that, given it's an ongoing process.
So my apologies that you haven't received that information. I'm responding to the specific question which was asked at Exec Board, and that was the response that I gave it to Councillor Lamb at Exec Board, which was around the fact that through the expression of interest process we had identified that we did have a range, which, as I've said, went from £40.66 to 66, but I absolutely commit to, we have the information, it's there, it's gone through the due process, and I will share that.
Thank you. It'd be useful if we could share it through Rob, actually, so it can be shared with the whole board. That would be really helpful. Thank you. Councillor, was that your... Thank you very much indeed. And Kayleigh.
Thank you, Chair. And just going back on to page 37, and just adding on to what Councillor Edwards kind of gone over. With regards to the settings now, the provisions moving on to schools and all, I wonder whether or I'm asking myself a question whether are we going to wait to hear any responses and any feedbacks from those that transitions, which is the 3 now, and how long are we going to wait? The reason I'm asking that question is in terms of going to the appendix 45, page 45, we see the feedback from the focus group and the questionnaires and all that. Parents have got so much of worry that they've placed on this questionnaire. So I'm thinking if we are then going to do a market sounding exercise on the remaining ones, and without us understanding what the 3, like the feedback from the 3, how will that work? I would like possibly for exec to kind of like, if possible, whilst doing the market sounding exercise, wait a little bit so we get, even if it's a full, I know finances are tight, but it will be great for a full year and for us to review and see how it's gone, how things have worked out. Because if we are to do the market sounding exercise and we push through the remainder, I'm worried that, we would have not had any learning in terms of how that transition, especially regarding to the worrying of finances, of how the movement from it being Little House and going into another settings, how the staff will be treated, the children. Is it possible that that review or that market sounding exercise would not be that it pushes the remainder and we don't have a full, proper feedback from the 3 that have, is it possible? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. We've done the market sounding exercise. That's what this report is about. So we've closed the 3 on the 31st of August. And then in September, we did the market sounding exercise on the 12th. And now we're in the process, and that was taken to Exec Board, and now we're in the process of looking at the expressions of interest during that market sounding exercise and whether there is anything that will progress. We've got 4 that the nearby school is interested in taking over out of the 12, and then we've got expressions of interest from different providers, and we will look at it on a case-by-case basis. So, and if it complies to our high standards, then like you say about staffing and working with our trade union colleagues, etc., as well as and most importantly the care of the children, then we will look to move however many nurseries out of that 12 to another provider, 4 of which hopefully will be schools.
Chair, thank you. Just on looking at the 12 that remains, I've got 1 which is in my ward, and that is Osmonthorpe. As we know, my ward is one of the most deprived in the Leeds City Council, and I'm really worried that anything that's going to move it and prices or anything that will, anything that would make the parents to have to pay more than they can, most of them can't afford it already. So I think that's why I was asking whether any movement of the remainder, I know there's already expression of interest, whether is there, especially that there are some, most of them are, or my ward is it's deprived, whether can it be delayed or can we get a full review before it moves into a school setting? Is that something possible?
In terms of the Osmonthorpe nursery, yeah, it's very much on our priority list to get right. Shouldn't be because of the vulnerabilities with parents who work are entitled to the free nursery places, no matter where they are, and that was expanded to 9 months from 9 months in September. As I said, each case will be looked at individually, and our commitment to children who are looked after, children with vulnerabilities, with SEND, and with the deprivation, but which is why we're keeping 9 definitely open, and definitely for our children in those very vulnerable areas. But having done the sufficiency, but yeah, I can assure you that from somebody who is not a million miles away from Osmonthorpe with my ward. In fact, we're right next door. It's a very high priority for me that we, if it does go to another provider, that we get it right.
I just wanted to highlight, really, and we've shared it previously at Scrutiny and Executive Board, that none of us would want to be in the position that we are in today. But the reason that we are in this position is because of the financial challenges that we as a council and also as a directorate have. In 22-23, our nurseries overspent by just short of £2 million. Despite the efficiencies that we made throughout that year, in 23-24 the overspend was £840,000. We have our savings that we have to make, because we have to be sustainable, financially sustainable as a council, so that we can meet the needs of children and young people right across the city. Because if we cannot achieve financial sustainability, then all of that is at risk. So it's really difficult decisions. Already we've taken the views of parents and carers through the consultation processes that we've had today into our decision making, and we will absolutely continue to do that. But because of where we are, we're having to adhere to our timescales and and make some really, really difficult decisions.
Thank you. Shanaz.
Thank you, Chair. Just really quickly, I wanted to ask about the expression of interest process on your tender. Was there any restrictions or any kind of guidelines for any particular organisation to apply? I know that the report mentioned the feedback from parents said that they didn't want it to go out to, say, a private organisation, and would prefer to have it to go to somebody who would put back into the organisation instead. And then the other question I just wanted to clarify was, I was just a bit unclear about that it spoke about potential to continue partnership with council services, and it said it would be assessed. So I was just wondering why that would be assessed on an individual basis. I don't know if I'm clear on it, but I thought that that's the purpose of the council services for partnerships. So should it not continue? Thank you.
So for the first part of your question around the restrictions, so the purpose of the market sounding exercise was really to be quite open and just test the market to see what type of provider may be interested. That helped us and informed us for what we will do now that was agreed at exec, which would be to go through the formal process. What I can say is in the market sounding, we got a range of providers from third sector and private and education as well. So that gave us the confidence that there was some potential interest out there. The next stage, we will be much more tighter in terms of our questions. It will be a formal process in terms of responses, where there will be any interested provider will be expected to give a lot more detail, whether that be about price, around sort of kind of their workforce development strategy, how they can meet the needs of children with additional needs, etc. And we will be absolutely using the information that we gathered from parents about what is important to them. Absolutely, that will be built into it. And we're also, once we've had the initial sort of kind of responses, we're looking at how we can involve parents from those individual settings to have some sort of influence over which provider would be deemed suitable by them and not just by officers.
Anybody else?
If I just pick up that second bit about partnership, one of the things that we'll seek to do when we're considering the next steps is about what that organisation says about its ability and its willingness to work in partnership, because working in partnership, particularly in early years, is a really, really significant issue. So it's something that we'd seek to capture and then test. Probably also just to be absolutely clear, you know, we're committed to making sure that we engage with parents in terms and trade unions and other stakeholders. What we're planning to do is to capture that now effectively. That then forms part of the assessment element of the formal process. The formal process, though, has to be undertaken by officers of the council as the commissioning authority. So just so there is a delineation between those two, but that's a natural issue that arises from us procuring and commissioning that, just to clarify that point.
Thank you. Colleagues, anybody else? No? Okay, thank you very much. We have an action point. No, now I've got to find the action point. Any advance on which page jump should... Thank you, 31, there we go. Okay, the action point, we're asked to note and comment on the report and the appendices on the Little Owls Nurseries Review. Can I just, actually, before we move that, thank colleagues for bringing this and for giving us the opportunity. I know you did undertake to do that, but it's appreciated that this has been brought back at this stage, so Scrutiny's had the opportunity to look at it, to challenge it, to feed back on it. And I think Kaylee has made some really important points about the concerns, particularly in vulnerable areas, about where this is moving, and to make sure that, and we've had that assurance about seeking to ensure that we're protecting our most vulnerable young people and their families. So the recommendation is contained at page 31. Somebody happy to move that? Thank you. Oliver, from second. Eleanor, thank you very much. All in favour? Against? Any abstentions? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. That moves us to item number 9, the 3A's strategy update. We have cunningly managed to buy ourselves about 3 minutes, so we'll have a quick comfort break and then we will move on to agenda item 9. So just a short comfort break. Can I remind everybody that there are buns, cakes and the like, and unless there is an attempt to move me away from healthy eating, please do eat them. Thanks, everybody. Let's crack back on. Standing ovation. Okay, agenda item 9, last substantive item of today's meeting. The 3A's action update. Who's going to kick us off? Thanks, Helen.
I'll kick off. So, yes, this is the actions update on the 3A's plan. Now, what are the 3A's, I hear you cry? They are attendance, attainment and achievement. So this covers the plan for 2024 to 2026, which was launched in the summer term. And there's 5 priority areas: communication, language and literacy, attendance, SEND, so that's special educational needs and disabilities, well-being and transition to positive post-16 destinations. And I think this board has demonstrated today perfectly that we are prioritising as Leeds, prioritising those 5 priority areas. Further information on the plan and helpful resources can be accessed on the Leeds for Learning website, and I would encourage members to familiarise themselves with the content in addition to the links that are dotted through the report. The paper is clear that the priorities are selected are the ones where children and families can have the most impact in supporting learning settings, whilst recognising that each setting will have its own priorities and development plan. There's a real focus on partnership working as we strive to achieve the best possible outcomes for the children and young people of Leeds. And I'll leave it there. I don't know whether anybody else would like to comment on the report.
There's lots that I would like to say, but we haven't got a lot of time, so I think if I just leave it to questions as far as possible. I think the key thing here is about the work described here is work that's happening across the system. It's not that the council is doing all of it, it's doing some of it's about encouraging people to skill themselves up in particular areas, but this is the delivery of this strategy is ultimately a system piece of work. That's all I need to say, I think, for now.
Colleagues. Thanks.
Just 2 things very briefly. Really pleased to see the trauma-informed approach and the approach to children looked after coming into early years and into primary schools. A question that our ward colleague in fact raised at Scrutiny last week about the challenge around post-16 provision, particularly at level 2 in outer areas. It's a double challenge at the moment because the bus timetables have just been wrecked. So students are finding it harder. So I had an email from a grandparent this week whose grandson is thriving at Lighthouse. He's now having a bit of a nightmare getting there. So that double challenge of transport and the lack of placements in outer areas, it's come up a couple of times in the last week, so I thought it'd be helpful to share. Thank you.
If I can come back on that one, we are in the middle of writing a paper for the next Scrutiny Board or the January Scrutiny Board, I think, where we're going to have a much deeper dive into post-16. Suffice to say that knowing what we now know about the sufficiency and the balance of places across the city, following on from the work that Julie commissioned about a year ago, we were successful in securing, I think I've said before, 900 additional places funded in advance through the DFE for this year ahead of September 25. So we've got a lot of work to do now to make sure we match them to the right children. But that feels like a success story, at least in its infancy. I can't speak to the transport yet. I don't know if anyone else wants to, but yeah, thank you.
But it is, when we're looking at sufficiency, we do need to keep in mind that a lot of, especially the level 1 and 2 courses, are in the city centre, and it's not just, obviously the northwest are travelling in, but the outer areas in the south and the southeast, and as well as the far northeast, where transport links are, and when there are buses, and even when they're regular, it will take over an hour, each way to get into there. So I'm really keen to look with this piece of work with Leeds City College and other partners at provision in the outer areas. Lighthouse is fabulous, but actually that's not in the city centre, that is, and we're incredibly lucky that, you know, Lighthouse use Temple Newsome and use the estate, which is fabulous, but getting there will always be a bit of a struggle, and so in terms of that SEND provision, if it's out of the city centre, that can be a difficulty as well. But they're all kind of plates that we need to keep spinning and looking at the best possible solutions.
Oliver.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of really positive things in here. I wanted to ask about on page 95, Action 3. So universal free literacy training offered to all Leeds early year settings. I think this is so important. It's important across the board. I think it's especially important where we have parents for whom English is an additional language, and when we think about some of the newer communities within the city. And so I really welcome the focus on those early years. Just a question building out of that, have we considered how that can be extended to a range of settings outside of statutory settings? So I'm thinking particularly when it comes to some of the faith and belief communities within the city. There are many different churches, mosques, gurdwaras, and other organisations, other faith organisations, where they have provision within their communities for children and young people, and it's hugely impressive when you see the things that a lot of people are doing and a lot of volunteers are doing, and I wonder if there are ways that the provision that's being put forward can be extended to some of those settings as well, in order to meet those parents, and particularly those parents for whom English is not their first language. Is that something that we can look at?
Thank you. We chose communication and language, obviously, particularly post-COVID as well, knowing that the children that were coming through the system had been so disadvantaged by that experience, and that there's so much work to do. And we know that if we get communication and language right at the early years, the trajectory of a child's kind of course through their education and into adult life is just massively altered. There is something about this is offered to all settings. So if the settings that you're talking about are registered early year settings, then they will have received the offer. But that doesn't mean that we can't, because sometimes you have to drip feed these offers through different channels. So I think it would be a helpful and fairly easy thing to do to provide that offer through those different channels to see if it captured things. There is something as well about this will only be as effective as the number of children that we want to reach are attending the settings where it's offered. So there is something about encouraging take-up of particularly free entitlement early years places in the communities that we really want to reach. So you've sort of touched on something there about wanting to target the availability of free entitlement places. So I'll take away, though, the question about the different kind of faith centres and see if there's a way of, drip feeding that information and availability in through a different channel. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that would be really good, because and I think at the weekend I was at a meeting with my colleague Councillor Manaka, and we were meeting people from the Roma community, and for example they were talking about how there was one church where there were 300 members who regularly attended, and that wasn't the largest church either, but this is but we have quite a few communities where I think people would really benefit from that, but also where engagement has sometimes been a bit slower, where there are sometimes issues of trust, and this can be something hugely valuable, because the thing that all of the parents there spoke about was how they wanted their children to do better than they were doing. They wanted their children to have those opportunities. But if the children are in a community where everyone speaks the same language, there can be additional barriers for them. And so I think there is a real opportunity here to use that. And I give the example of the Pentecostal churches and the Roma communities, but that would be true for many different faith communities. So it would be good to have that conversation and maybe think a bit more about how that can be structured and also how that can be sold as well, how that can be presented, what things that the team working around faith can do, but also things that we as individual ward members can do where appropriate.
I am going to do that. So that's all I'll say, but it's a great idea, so thank you.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we talked at a previous board about I'm talking about page 96, 97 here, the priority 2, the attendance, about not encouraging schools to do 100% attendance certificates. I think I'm right. And then looking at the information about attendance, it's very much about encouraging. Having spoken to some schools and some parents, I'm concerned that the messaging that's going out from the council isn't getting that across fully. There does still seem to be that schools are feeling pressurised to go for 100% attendance, and they're concerned about the effect that that is having on students with disabilities and students with illness.
Thank you. I'm fairly sure that we haven't got anything that goes out that says that we're aiming for 100% attendance, but I will double check that. The message very clearly from central government and from Leeds is that we want to make every school day count, and that school is a really important protective factor for lots of children and young people. It's a really, really tough message to get out in the right way. So whilst we're encouraging all children to attend all the time, that's always going to be a problem for some children. So it's about kind of balancing that message at the same time as being really ambitious for all children and young people to be in school as often as possible and have really positive attendance. But I will go back and double check that we're not giving out that mixed message.
If I could just add to that, I think the discussion was around not giving a class an award for having 100% attendance, because getting 30 kids in every day is very, and I've seen it with my own children, that the class can turn on one individual who has poor attendance because they never get that. So I think giving individual, it is a real achievement to turn up to school every day, and I know it's not possible for some children because of disability and or illness, but it is, especially for some of our children, where getting out of bed is a challenge. If you've done it, like if you've done a full week of 100% attendance, then I think you need rewarding. But rewarding 30 children for getting 100% attendance altogether is very divisive at times, and I think that's the discussion that we had.
I have to say, I recall it being that way as well. I must say, and speaking personally as a father of a daughter who is obsessive about making sure she gets her gold 100% attendance badge at the end of each school year, I'm a great believer in those. Tim, sorry.
I understand that, but that can be incredibly demotivating for the students who just physically can't make it 100%, and I wonder if then, therefore, they are factored in, but what I'm saying is that some of the schools, the messaging doesn't seem to be getting through to them about that. So is it about the way that schools are encouraged to do that, so that the reward goes out individually and isn't in front of everyone else, something like that? Don't shoot the messenger, that's the feedback I'm getting from both parents and schools. So there's a bit of a concern around that area.
There will always be, schools do everything differently. I mean, we send out the message that attendance is incredibly important, that it, as Rebecca said, it's a protective factor, especially for our more vulnerable learners. And we are required by law to have attendance at a certain rate, otherwise we can be legally challenged by central government, and quite rightly, if we're not encouraging it. In terms of safeguarding, it's enormously important that children are in school as many days as possible. Rebecca will check that we don't say, we'd encourage 100%. That's not possible always. I'm blown away by children who do a full primary school like career, and I remember those here where they literally have not had one day off. But it is, and also for some children who don't have academic success, being rewarded for trying your best and being there. And I understand that children with disability and or illness will struggle, but there are lots of children who struggle in many, many different ways, especially with the school environment. And I'd like them, and we're talking about 3 A's here, it's not just about attainment, it's about achievement. And I've taught many kids who getting into there and sitting in that chair in front of me, I'm sorry I'm getting emotional, is an achievement, and I want to recognise that.
I have to say, Councillor Hayden, you and I are exactly on the same page as this. As many of you know, my son has quite profound learning disability, and for him, getting into school every single day is a massive achievement, and he's so proud. He has 2 years in a row, he's managed to come in every single day. I managed to come in, we take him in. It's not a negotiation. But he is so proud of that fact, and you know, he makes sure that he's there and he's on time and he's ready and he's smart and he's ready to learn, and he's very proud of those 100% gold badges he wears. And I think that's right, and I think Helen's exactly right. For many young people, that is, for any young person, that is a massive achievement and something that's right for settings to celebrate. And I think I share your view 100% on that. David.
Thank you. So I'm a SEND governor at a primary school in Seacroft, and last Monday they had 150 staff attended a training day on neurodiversity, and it was run in part by the ADHD Foundation, which I'd recommend people signing up to. So I think it's really important that those sorts of initiatives went down really well, because it's an area that I think a lot of teachers struggle with, but also need sort of strategies and resources to deal with those children. So I think it's really useful, and I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. There's an implication in the original question that schools will do what I tell them to do in terms of attendance. And no offence to any school leaders that are listening in at the moment, and I'm sure they're too busy to do that. But joking aside, I think this is about a culture, and really it's a question about reasonable adjustments, isn't it? So to your point, Councillor Cohen, and to yours, Councillor Hayden, and everybody, this is about making school as compelling a thing to come to so that everybody wants to, and rewarding it appropriately. So I don't think that we shouldn't give children who are at school 100% of the time a certificate. It would be wrong to sort of take that extrinsic motivation away because it perhaps was sort of made other children feel bad, but we do have to be sensitive about how we do that and how we reward attendance within the scope of what's possible for some children. So I think it's about recognising strengths and approaching this from an asset perspective rather than a deficit perspective. What can you do and how well do you do that? I could go on all day about this, but I'm going to stop because I'm sure there's more questions.
Colleagues, any questions? So just turning, if we could, to action 5 specifically. Perhaps we could just focus on EHCP needs assessment and the process, two elements within that. Perhaps you could just give us some update, because it does fall within that, on how we are making progress in addressing the backlog of EHCPs. I know we've taken on additional capacity for Ed Sykes in terms of getting that bit of the process done. Perhaps we could just have, so I am alive to the fact that we can create capacity here, but then have a bottleneck further down the process, for example, at the MAP meeting stage. So just how we are ensuring that the system has capacity all the way through. And then I'm just alive, and Councillor Scopes wrote in relation to this, and I feel, given he wrote to it but can't make it, duty bound to flag it up, some concerns around, and understandably, as we move away from FFI, which we have to do legally, and thank you to Dan and Julie for making it, helping me understand how and why we have to do that. It's really appreciated. How we are going to deal with that, I know we've said in the report we've got the means to deal with this extra 4,500 young people, but perhaps the board can have a little bit more reassurance on exactly how we're going to do that, how we're going to ensure that young people are not being disadvantaged by what we've got to do, how we're going to make sure this works for young people, not against them. I'm speaking in really broad terms, but I'm hoping you get the reassurance that perhaps we'd just like to have as a board.
Thank you. So on the first question around the backlog, we've discussed in a number of meetings previously about the fact that we have put some additional resource in and managed to secure that in order to buy in the education psychology capacity. That contract also includes plan writing as part of it. So what happens is for that chunk of children who have been waiting for a very long time, we've pushed out now. We're allocating those assessments to those externally procured education psychologists, and I think we're now about 240 of the backlog EHCP assessment requests that have gone out to the company that are delivering that for us. We are starting to see those coming back. I think we've got more than 40 back, so that's a good sign that the assessments are being done. For the last 2 weeks, we have seen some of the EHC panel, decision-making panel, some of those cases have come back through the panel and then have gone back out again to the plan writers. So what happens is the assessments get done by the EdSite capacity, they come back into our multi-agency decision-making panel and then are reallocated back out to the same company who then use their plan writers to write the plans. And so that is happening. We will see the actual impact of that because we allocate those cases at week 12. We have to wait for 8 weeks until we're able to issue the plan, because there are various other statutory timescales, including 15 days consultation with schools and settings. So we will see in, I'm just thinking the mental calculation, probably 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks time, we'll start to see some of those plans for children who were in the queue of out of timescale assessments being issued with plans. So that's the first bit around, is it happening? So it is, and in terms of the timescales, we are aiming to do some communication. So there's been some really, really useful questions flagged as part of our SEND Oversight Board with schools, parents, SENCOs and local authority officers just last week, asking for some more proactive communication to settings to say, if you're in the queue and you're going to be allocated and this is when you can expect your assessment to start. And I think, amongst everything else, that would be a relatively easy thing for us to do. So we are going to do that. In terms of the FFI challenge, the how we're going to do it, it's very live, the conversation around resourcing, as you would expect at the moment. We have started the FFI transition nevertheless because we know that we have to. We're going to underwrite all of that in terms of our ability to process those new plans with the backstop, which I hesitate to use the term, but is essentially if we don't have an assessment for an EHCP and the associated resource ready, that child will continue to receive the resource they're currently receiving through the FFI model until we're ready to passport to the plan. So that's the guarantee.
Could we just focusing on the process a little bit, are we assured that we have enough capacity within the multi-agency partnership meetings so that they don't become a bottleneck in and of themselves?
I wonder who you've been talking to. I was talking to a special school head the other day who was telling me that there was an enormous amount of time that she had to spend doing the reading and the work through that bundle in order to make the panel effective. She quoted that previously, when there used to be a multi-agency panel many years ago in the city, she recalls a day on which the panel took a full day and they agreed 6 plans to go ahead. In the last one, I think she said, it's a 2.5 3 hour meeting, and they allocated 96 plans. So they made agreements around 96, and that's about the quality of the process. It requires a huge amount of work outside of the meeting for members of that panel, but they are getting through a huge amount of work. So I feel, although it's anecdotal, my sense is that that panel is definitely churning through the work in a way that gives me confidence that the panel can do it. I'll probably pause there for now, but ultimately the panel is working. It's then about our ability to carry out the assessments and the writing of the plans, which I've sort of alluded to in my previous answer.
Colleagues, any further questions on that? Thank you. Obviously, we will continue to keep that oversight on that issue. I'm sure it will come back. It will be useful to get just for the next meeting, literally a top line update on, just because that'll be in the new year, of just what bite we're taking into that backlog. Thank you for the reassurance around how we are going to make sure that if we run out of time, as it were, with some of those FFI funded young people, that we'll make sure that they're not prejudiced through that. That is really helpful. Anything else on that, colleagues? Okay. We don't have, as it were, we're just asked to discuss this issue, so we don't actually have anything to vote upon specifically, and we already have that this will keep coming back to us regularly. So I don't think there's anything for us to take forward as an action item on that. That then brings us to item 10, the work programme. I have to do this bit slightly differently. If you remember from the pre-meeting, I explained what I have to cover off in here, and I'm just looking for the relevant piece of paper. I have that. So colleagues will remember in the pre-meeting, I mentioned that we retain some duties following the disbandment of the SOAB, the School Organisation Advisory Board. And one of those responsibilities that we retain relates to looking at where objections are received to consultations relating to new schools or expansions of schools and the like. There are proposals that you will be aware of in relation to the Broomfield Silk expansion. I have written to colleagues around what that proposal involved. Consultation went out to the local community and others, and 2 objections came back relating to the proposal to expand the Broomfield Silk. We would normally look at those objections, except where those objections are purely related to planning-related matters. Where they relate to planning-related matters, those types of objections will be considered by a full plans panel, by the planning process. So to take this matter forward, it will be subject to a planning application. It will go through the normal planning process, and anybody, as is the case with planning, will have the opportunity to make an objection as part of the plans process. These objections both relate to matters that are planning matters. That is the advice of officers. It is also, I would add, the advice of all the councillors who have seen that, many of whom sit on plans panels. That being the case, it is certainly my view that there are no objections that we ought to be properly considering under our duties within the old school organisation advisory framework. And that is my proposal to this board. Before we go any further, I will invite any comments from Helen, Councillor Hayden and colleagues at the top before we, and then colleagues around the table before we move on.
No, I just want to support what you said, having been the exec member for planning. These are planning objections. And I'd like to thank the people who took the time to support the expansion. And actually, one of the objections, the objector supports the expansion of the school. It's just got some what are planning related matters. So yeah, I would thank the chair and thank the board. This is much needed expansion of SEND provision, which and places for children so they don't have to travel too far, and everything else that we've discussed today. So I thank the board for its support and support what you say as well, Chair.
Thank you. And of course, we mustn't miss out, of course, the satellite post 16 site as well near White Rose, which very much needed. Colleagues, anything to add? No, in that case...
Just making sure that as we spoke in the pre-mit, the bringing back, and I can see it's already in the schedule anyway.
Can I be cheeky? Can we finish with this item first?
Okay.
And while I appreciate your keenness, Councillor, can we just fear not? We will make sure we get that in. So the proposal is that the objections received relate purely to planning matters and therefore do not fall within the scope of our scrutiny board to determine to consider this matter further under our outstanding duties under the old SOAB arrangements. That's the proposal. Somebody happen to second that? Thanks, Roy. All in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? That is unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Councillor Manaka. Kelly, you're on.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to, work programme and moving on, as per the pre-meets, just asking if the board would consider, obviously I can see that it's already within the programme 24-25 Youth Services Working Group, and if we could please concentrate on youth violence and the youth justice system and just doing a piece of work around that.
Thank you. So could you turn your mic off? Kelly,
thank you.
Sorry, otherwise I can't see my beautiful face. So Kelly's proposes that we do a specific working group looking at the youth violence piece, which was a specific area within the report that came to us at the last meeting. I think we're quite keen that we do look at that. Is that colleagues generally happy with that? Yeah, Shanaz?
Sorry, is that in addition or as well? Is brilliant. Yeah. Thank you.
I think we were really keen that we really did a bit of a laser-like focus on that specifically, so that we've got a bit of time. And again, as a working group, it just gives us the ability to do, to quote Ofsted, a deep dive. Colleagues happy with that? Wonderful. So Rob will make sure we programme that in. Thank you very much indeed. Rob, anything else under that item?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, it's our usual work programme item. So obviously Appendix 1 has the work programme. Appendix 2 is the last exec board minutes. Obviously it's an opportunity for members to raise any work items, but I think we've probably just dealt with that. So subject to me getting some dates out, which I'm very conscious that I need to do, I'll be arranging those into the new year. Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Sorry, just on the youth violence item, is the preference we do that virtually or in person? It's just useful to have a feel on that. Any particular thoughts?
Yeah. gosh, it sounded like, I think in person would be preferable. I mean, you could offer hybrid for those who, it's such an important issue, and Councillor Jenkins, myself, sit on the Youth Justice Board, which is chaired by Julie, and I would encourage the involvement of key people from that board who are completely expert. And actually we heard Councillor Jenkins and I were all very moved by hearing from practitioners as well at the last Youth Justice Board. It was incredibly powerful, and whether we get some lived experience of working with young people into the working group as well. I really think that it at least needs to be hybrid, because these are really sensitive issues that we're talking about, and it can be quite triggering of emotions for many people, especially there's lots of discussions around bereavement and loss and domestic violence and those sorts of issues as well. So I'd encourage at least hybrid, if not in person.
Thanks for that, Helen. Oliver.
Thank you. Yeah, I think hybrids would be best if that can be facilitated here at the council. One aspect that I think would be particularly helpful in that is around the mental health side of it. So I know when we were talking about youth offending and the institutions, that there was discussion in there about some of the provision that is available within these settings, but also thinking about the provision when people come out. And mental health is such a massive part across all the prisons, youth offending institutions. So I think it'd be good to hear from colleagues with a mental health backgrounds as well, and to think about provision within those settings and also in the community as well.
So if I think what I'm going to ask Rob to do, rather than is I ask Rob to do a bit of a scoping exercise that can involve all of us, but obviously particularly Oliver and Kaylee, particularly because you've asked us specifically to look at this, and obviously Helen and David as well, so that we can be really, really focused. I think the key ask for this is that we really focused on a very specific area, and we can really spend some time looking at the real specifics. Helen, sorry, I cut you off. I didn't mean to. Okay. So we'll make sure that happens, and then we'll organise. So what we'll arrange it as a hybrid, with a hybrid meeting, with a strong encouragement for those that can come in person to please try to. I think I take Helen's point on that. Anything else under the work programme? Well, that takes us to the date and time of the next meeting, which is Wednesday, the 29th of January 2025 at 10:30 in the morning. It feels crazy, therefore, to be saying this on the 11th of November, but I do wish each and every one of you a very Merry Christmas. Those that are celebrating, which is me, a Happy Hanukkah. On the same day? Absolutely, both on the same day. And a happy, healthy, peaceful and prosperous New Year. But I'm sure we will all see each other well before then. Thank you, everybody.